Members of the Long Point Bay community, I want to say Happy Good Friday, and I can say that because Good Friday is not, should never be looked at, talked about, seen as an isolated event. It's part of a 3-day experience. So let me tell you something about that. It's called the Easter Triduum. And I'm looking specifically at Good Friday. So let me go to Good Friday and begin there. Let me tell you a little bit about crucifixion. I know we always see depicted Jesus nailed to the cross. Could that have happened? Yes, it could have. More likely because metal, was not easy to come by. It was, in a sense, a precious commodity. Not precious metals as we think of it, but metal was not easy to come by in the first century, the Common Era. So what was normally done was that the arms of the person being executed, their arms are tied to the crossbeam. And the crossbeam was put on the vertical beam, and you hung there. Now, you can only stay upright for so long, and you lose the energy to do that, and you drop, and you're hanging. And when you're in that position, your lungs begin to be compressed, and you can't breathe. So you have to go from that position. When you lose the ability to breathe, you have to raise yourself up so your lungs can expand, and then you can breathe for a bit, but you can only hold yourself up so long, and then you drop back down. It's back and forth until you can't bring yourself up any longer, and ultimately you die of suffocation because you can't breathe. And that can take days. It's a very, very slow, very agonizing death. And the other piece to remember, or to know, in case you didn't know, crucifixion was not a rare event. There's a case that we know of, a slave revolt, Judas, not Jesus Judas, another Judas. And there were over 1,000 crucified. It's between 1,000 or 2,000 were crucified. And the Appian Way, which was the road leading into Rome, was lined by crosses, by people dying from crucifixion. Very clear indication as you're coming into Rome, mess with us, that's where you'll end up. Pretty graphic, pretty stark, warning. Now with that as the background to Good Friday, let me give you one more way of coming at this. Nature can determine what happens, can determine the nature of the event. So all of the stuff that I've talked about, nature determines it, determines how you die, determines how you're crucified, all of that. But God can determine how that event is understood, how that event makes sense or not. And so there's a very real sense in which God can change that event by changing what that event means. Another way of saying that would be to say crucifixion was Rome's no to Jesus, and resurrection was God's yes to Jesus. And now the question becomes, and this is really critical, I mean, do you believe in the resurrection? And if I said why, what answer would you give? And if you give, that the Gospels report Jesus as risen, I would say to you, well, what you've got is the report of other people's experience of Jesus' resurrection. So your faith is based on somebody else's experience? How about your own? Have you experienced Jesus as alive? Which would also be a way of saying Rome lost. Pilate lost because Jesus was raised. Have I experienced the risen Christ? Yes, no question. Multiple times. Jesus comes knocking on my door with some regularity. And usually at the really, really tough times, when I'm kind of at my wit's end, kind of low. But yes, and spooky, no, but in prayer, usually. And at some point I would like to introduce you to a style of prayer where that's really accessible. It's called contemplation, but I haven't really figured out how to do that on a video. But yes, have I experienced Jesus as present, as alive, present to me? Yes, absolutely, on more than one occasion, for which I am always eternally grateful. So looking at an event like Easter, there's a phrase that I would use to try to make sense of death and resurrection, the two together. That nature can well determine what happens. So if you go through the process of crucifying someone, nature will determine how that takes its course. but God can determine how we see or how we understand that event. So resurrection is our way of understanding, our way of seeing, our way of putting God and the crucifixion together, and you come up with resurrection. And for a Christian, or certainly for me, as I understand Christianity, I think both of those are really, really important. It doesn't take a whole lot of faith to read history and the history of Roman crucifixions and understand it. But how about resurrection? I mean, if we're going to really talk about Easter and make sense of it, I think it's really, really important that we try to have a personal experience of Jesus as alive, Jesus as present, so that if somebody says, well, he was crucified, that was the end of it. Not for me, it isn't. Have I experienced Jesus as alive and as present to me? Yes, absolutely. On more than one occasion, which probably says I've had more than a few occasions where I was desperate. And Jesus came. Oh, okay, Jack, let's talk about this. and Jesus has been very, really present to me. And usually in prayer, not always. Sometimes he just comes and smacks me upside the head and say, "Yo, Jack." But usually in prayer. So do I believe in the resurrection? Yes. Why? Because I've experienced Jesus as alive and present to me. And so all of the gospel proclamations take on a reality for me, because that's has been part of my faith experience. And can I talk to Jesus? And do we have conversations? Yes, and when I finish talking, Jesus will probably say something like, you finished talking, you ready to listen? Yeah. So as we celebrate Good Friday, the beginning of the Easter Triduum, the 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the death and resurrection of Jesus, I invite you to do that in as visceral a way as you possibly can, to be in touch with both the agony and the suffering that was part of Jesus' experience, and part of the experience of the Christian community when they saw the one that they looked to change everything, crucified. Experience that in your own experience, those dead ends, and also allow God to raise Jesus up within you, so that you can say, what I thought was a dead end was really simply a doorway into another way of seeing, another way of being, another way of living. And if we can do that, we can really celebrate the good news that God gives us in the Easter event. Have an incredible Easter celebration.